Tayo's lips curled into a sly smile. "Stop acting like you don't know," she replied romantically. With their parents gone, Kahindi and Tayo went back into their room, unaware that a hidden camera was silently recording their every move. The twins proceeded to undress each other while the camera sat unnoticed on top of the wardrobe, its lens capturing everything. They both fell on the bed and continued with their normal dreadful act. This time, it wasn't just simple touching, they proceeded to do it the way they watched it on TV the other night. Kahindi felt relaxed having an affair with her twin sister because nobody was at home to stop or apprehend them, and Tayo was also enjoying what her brother was doing to her. As they were playing inside their room, the camera was recording everything. Their neighbor was overhearing them from outside, but this time she didn't bother because their parents would never believe anything they said about her children. Far from home, Wana and Frank arrived at the company party. The hall was lively with music, laughter, and conversations. Frank, eager to enjoy himself, joined his colleagues in dancing and chatting, but Wana felt uneasy. She sat alone at a table, staring at nothing, lost in thought. The way her children seemed almost too eager to be left alone haunted her thoughts. The neighbor's report of the strange feeling in her chest tried to push it all aside, but it refused to leave her mind. Noticing her expression, Frank walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked, concerned. Wana blinked and forced a small smile. "Yes, I'm fine, just a little stomach ache." "Are you sure?" "You look worried," he asked again, with a more curious look. "Yes, honey, I'm absolutely fine," she lied. "If then, why not join me? Let's dance." "That's why we're here, after all," he requested. You can go ahead. I'm having a stomach upset, and I don't want to stress myself too much," Wana replied, rubbing her hands on her stomach. Frank studied her face but nodded. "All right, just rest. I'll be with my colleagues." As soon as he left, Wana sighed and reached for a drink. Before she could take a sip, her phone buzzed. She frowned at the unknown number flashing on the screen and opened the message. "Wana, come back home immediately. You need to see something with your own eyes." Her heart pounded in her chest. Who could have sent this? What was happening at home? What is it that I have to see with my own eyes? Could it be about my kids? Different thoughts ran through her mind as she quickly dialed the number, but the call wouldn't go through. Panic gripped her. She had to get home. Slipping out of the party unnoticed, she rushed outside, flagged down a taxi, and urged the driver to go as fast as possible. When she arrived, she saw a group of neighbors gathered near her house, murmuring among themselves. Their eyes followed her as she hurried past them, her stomach twisting with anxiety. She banged hard on the door, and Tayo opened it, looking startled. "Mom, why are you back so soon?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Wana didn't answer. She walked past her and strode straight to the bedroom. Tayo hesitated before following her, heart racing. Without a word, Wana reached for the wardrobe and pulled out the small camera. Her hands trembled as she struggled to operate the camera, and as she did, her breath caught in her throat. Her face went pale, her eyes widened in disbelief, and her entire body stiffened. Tayo's eyes widened with fear at the sight of her mother tampering with the camera. Kahindi, who had been lying on the bed moments ago, sat up in shock, his heart sinking into his stomach. "Wait, what? What is this? No, this is not possible." Wana screamed in pain. Tayo's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in short, nervous gasps. Beside her, Kahindi was already shivering in fear, his hands trembling slightly. Their mother, Wana, pressed the buttons on the camera, her fingers tense with anticipation. But to her greatest surprise, the screen showed nothing of what she had expected. The camera had only captured the ceiling fan and the clothes hanging in the corner of the room. Her brows furrowed, confusion washing over her. Something wasn't right. She turned sharply to face her children, her eyes dark with suspicion. "Come here, come closer," she commanded. Cindy and Tayo hesitated but obeyed, stepping toward their mother, their eyes fixed on her lips, waiting for what she would say next. "Who touched this camera among the two of you?" Wana's voice was sharp, her eyes scanning their faces for any sign of guilt. Cindy's lips quivered. "Mom, I didn't touch any camera." Tayo took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Mom, I didn't even know you put a camera in our room." I was even surprised when you walked straight to the wardrobe and pulled it out. You know the wardrobe is too high for us to reach. How could we have touched it even if we saw it? Wana's hands tightened around the camera, her mind racing. She scrolled through the footage again, pressing buttons, rewinding, fast-forwarding, desperate to find what she had expected to see. But it was useless. There was nothing. Even the audio wasn't recorded, only a still image of the ceiling fan spinning lazily, shadows flickering on the walls. Her mind kept wondering as to why the camera recorded only the ceiling fan and the audio recording was turned off. Tayo felt her body relax slightly, relief washing over her. Their mother wouldn't find anything incriminating. This was her chance to take control of the conversation. "But Mom, why did you hide a camera inside our room?" she said with a steady voice. "Are you suspecting us of something, or have you finally started listening to what the neighbors say about Kahindi and me?" Kahindi quickly added, "Yes, Mom, why did you put a camera in our room? Don't you trust your own children anymore?" Wana stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, but no words came out. She had no excuse ready, no lie she could tell. Without answering, she turned and walked out of the room. As soon as she left, Tayo quickly shut the door, a wide grin spread across her face as she turned to Kahindi. "We have escaped once again, all thanks to you, Tayo. You saved us today," she smiled confidently. "You don't have to worry. As long as we're in this together, we'll never be caught." Cindy's curious eyes got the better of him. "But how did you even find out about the camera?" Tayo chuckled. "I wasn't sleeping when Mom came in. I had woken up from a strange dream and was lying in bed, thinking about it when I heard footsteps approaching. I pretended to be asleep and peeked. Then I saw Mom placing something on top of the wardrobe. When Mom and Dad left for the party, I climbed up and checked. That's when I found the camera pointing straight at our bed. So I changed its position and turned off the audio recording." Kahindi stared at his sister in awe, a wide smile stretched across his face. "Wow, you're amazing." "Thank you," she laughed softly. "You don't have to thank me. We just have to be more careful," Tayo responded as she proceeded to give her brother a tight hug. Tayo and her brother continued this very deadly act without being caught. It had now become part of their life, and they both enjoyed each other. Days passed, and life in the house continued as usual. But one morning, something awkward happened. Tayo walked into her parents' room to retrieve something she had left there the previous night. Her mother was busy in the kitchen preparing breakfast, and Frank, her father, had just stepped out of the bathroom, fresh from a warm bath. A towel was wrapped around his waist as he gently applied some creams on his body, without noticing Ty's presence. She just stood at a corner, admiring her father's body. Frank felt comfortable as he applied the creams on his body. It was only when he turned to grab his clothes from the bed that he noticed the presence of Tayo. He froze for a moment, surprised before breaking into a warm smile. "Oh, Tayo, you're here," he exclaimed with surprise. "How long have you been standing there?" Tayo didn't respond immediately. She was a bit lost in thought and had no idea someone was calling out to her. "Tayo, Tayo," Frank called again, his voice rising slightly in concern. The sharpness in his tone snapped Tayo back to reality, and she blinked rapidly. "Are you all right?" he added. "Yes, Dad, I'm fine," she replied softly. Frank tilted his head, studying her with a mixture of curiosity and paternal concern. "I didn't even know when you walked in. How long have you been standing there?" I just came down now," she stammered, her mind racing for an excuse. "I came to pick up some of my stuff that I forgot here." She slightly moved toward the dresser, her heart racing, hoping her father didn't suspect she had been standing inside the room since and wouldn't scold her after. But to her surprise, Frank simply nodded with a softened expression. "All right," Frank said as he gestured toward the bed. "You can have a seat." Tayo was surprised that her father offered her a seat, and slowly she made her way to the bed and sat down. Frank wasn't bothered, rather, he engaged her in a discussion as he moved around from one end of the house to the other. Tayo kept staring at her father as he moved about, and she suddenly decided to speak up. "Daddy, Daddy," she called out to her father in a romantic manner. Frank stared at her with a confused expression, his eyes searching for some clue as he struggled to understand her expression. Taiwo looked away, slowly fidgeting with the hem of her cloth, but Frank simply shrugged and turned back to dressing up for where he was going. "Dad, can I help dress you up?" Taiwo asked with eagerness. Frank paused and turned to look at her, a playful smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. "Dress me up? Can you even dress me?" he teased. Taiwo nodded eagerly, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Yes, Daddy, I can even bathe you. You're my father, and I can do anything for you. Remember when we were small, you used to bathe us. Now it's our turn to bathe you as you get older." Frank burst into laughter, the sound rich and warm, filling the room. He shook his head, clearly amused by her words. "Oh, Taiwo, you're something else," he said, still chuckling, completely unaware of how his daughter's eyes lingered on him for a moment too long. "Dad, I'm your only daughter," she said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, "and you promised to do anything I asked, remember?" Frank nodded. "Yeah, that's what I said, and I've been doing my best to keep that promise, haven't I?" He reached for a shirt, slipping it over his broad shoulders. "Our birthday is coming very soon," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "and I want to ask you for a favor, Dad." She pleaded with a pitiful expression. Frank turned to face her fully. "Come on, my queen. Spit it out. Your father will do his best to make it happen, even if it means taking out a loan. I'll do it for my only daughter." Taiwo took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "Dad, when we were 8, you, Mom, Kahindi, and I used to bathe together in the bathroom. It was so much fun. I've really missed those happy times. I wish we could bathe together again before we turn 18. Frank stood frozen, his eyes wide with surprise. For a long moment, he didn't say a word. Taiwo's heart raced, hoping she hadn't said something out of turn, as her palm grew sweaty. "Dad, is something wrong? Are you not okay with it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Finally, Frank blinked and let out a soft chuckle. "Okay, then. I thought it was something else, but since it's just a cool bath with my only daughter, there's nothing wrong with that. I'd go miles to make you happy," he said with a warm voice. Taiwo's face lit up with relief and joy. "Thank you so much, Dad," she exclaimed, her voice bubbling with excitement. When she heard her mother humming a cheerful song as she walked toward the room, she quickly stood up and turned to leave. "I have to go catch up with my twin brother now," she added, her tone suddenly hurried. Frank stood there for a moment, staring at the empty doorway, and he let out a long breath. He had no idea he had been holding his mind swirling with thoughts he couldn't quite put into words. Slowly, he finished buttoning his shirt and hurried to where he was going. It was Monday, the start of another school week, and the house stirred with the familiar routine of preparation. Their father, Frank, had already left for work, and their mother, Wana, was busy in the kitchen, packing their food for the day. Inside the bedroom, the twins were moving about and helping each other to dress up for school. Taiwo stood in front of the mirror, slowly packing her long hair, occasionally stealing glances at her brother, who sat on the bed, buttoning his school shirt. "You're taking too long, Taiwo," Kahindi murmured, watching her from the corner of his eye. "You always spend too much time in front of the mirror." Taiwo smiled, tilting her head slightly. "I just like to look good." "Don't you like the way I look?" she asked, her voice carrying a soft tease. Kahindi chuckled, fastening his last button before stepping closer. "You always look good, Twinny, but we're going to be late if you don't hurry." She turned to face him, her lips curving into a playful smirk. "Why are you always in a rush? Can't we enjoy our morning without you hurrying me?" she replied, slowly licking her finger. Kahindi sighed, shaking his head. "Mom will call us any minute now. Just finish up." Downstairs, Wana was packing their lunches, humming softly as she placed the neatly wrapped food into their bags. She occasionally glanced toward the staircase, expecting the twins to come down at any moment. Finally, Taiwo and Kahindi emerged from their room, their hands brushing slightly as they descended the stairs. The dining table was set, their breakfast steaming on their plates. They took their seats facing each other, their eyes meeting briefly before they began to eat. Taiwo reached for a slice of bread, spreading butter across it in slow, deliberate strokes. "I love the way Mom makes breakfast," she murmured, her eyes on Kahindi. Kahindi nodded. "It's good," he said simply, though his gaze remained locked on her. Wana, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, stepped into the dining room and watched her children for a moment. She noticed the way they interacted, the silent looks they exchanged. Something about it felt off, but she quickly pushed the thought away. They were just close, she reasoned, nothing more. "Are you both ready for school?" she asked, grabbing her car keys from the table. "Yes, Mom," Tayo replied, wiping her mouth with a napkin. Wana handed them their lunch bags, eyeing them carefully. "All right, hurry up and meet me at the car," Wana said as she hurried outside. The twins soon joined her at the car, and she drove them to school. When they reached, Wana offered them the usual morning reminders. "You two should pay attention in class," she said, her voice filled with concern. "No trouble, and don't let me receive any complaints." "We will, Mom," Kahindi said with a small smile. "We'll be good, Mom." "Don't worry," Tayo chimed in. She watched them step out of the car, waving goodbye as they disappeared into the crowd of students. As she drove off, a lingering doubt settled in her heart. Something was changing between her children, something she couldn't quite place, and she had no idea how to go about it. But for now, she ignored it, convincing herself that everything was just as it had always been. At school, when the lunch break bell rang, students rushed out of their classrooms, eager to grab a meal or chat with friends. Kahindi felt the urgent need to use the toilet, so he quickly made his way towards the restroom, walking hurriedly as if he could barely hold it in. Tayo, who had been standing near the hallway, noticed his twin brother's unusual rush. A curious smile spread across her face as she decided to follow him. She quickened her steps, moving quietly behind Kahindi, not wanting him to know she was following him. Kahindi finally reached the male restroom, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. He walked straight to one of the urinals, sighing in relief as he prepared to ease himself. Just as he was almost finished urinating, he suddenly felt arms wrap around him from behind. A cold shiver ran down his spine, and his whole body stiffened. His heart pounded as fear gripped him for a split second. Who would grab him like that in the bathroom? Kai, who is he? He turned his head sharply, ready to push the person away. But then he caught sight of Tayo's mischievous grin in the mirror above the sink. "Kai, Tayo, you scared me," Kahindi exhaled in relief, shaking his head. Tayo laughed sheepishly, like a child seeking attention. "Why so serious? You were running like you stole something." Kahindi scoffed. "I needed to pee, that's why." "Why are you even following me?" "Because I missed you," she murmured. Kahindi turned around and looked at her with raised eyebrows. "Missed me? We've been together every day," he teased. She pouted. "Not like that. It's been almost 2 days since we." "You know. You're something else," he said, shaking his head with a smile. "And you love it," she replied, grinning. "We both love it." Kahindi softened, and Tayo proceeded with their deadly act, and the rest was history. It was a nice evening as the family was having their dinner. The warm aroma of freshly cooked food lingered in the air, with the soft clinking of cutlery against plates. Everyone seemed to be enjoying the meal, but Tayo had barely taken a few bites of her food when an uneasy feeling twisted in her stomach. At first, she tried to ignore it, thinking it would pass, but within seconds, a sharp pain shot through her belly, making her wince. She clutched her stomach with one hand, her face contorting in discomfort, her breathing grew uneven, and a wave of nausea rushed over her. Without saying a word, she shot up from her seat, knocking her chair back slightly. Her other hand flew to her mouth as she bolted from the dining table, ignoring the confused stares of her parents and her brother. She barely made it to the toilet before her stomach gave in. Bending over the sink, she started retching and vomiting violently, her body trembling as she emptied the contents of her stomach. The bitter taste made her gag even more, and tears stung her eyes as the pain in her stomach increased. We'll be stopping here for now. Stay tuned for part 3. It's going to be interesting this time. Kindly like and subscribe and comment your opinion on this story. Thanks.